Okay, example 4b. Similar situation to before, where I'm going to start off with a function, f of x equals, we'll make this one a little bit more complicated, where I have the square root of 2x minus 5. And really the only reason this is a little more complicated is just figuring out what my domain and my range would be at the very beginning. But really other than that, it's the same process. So my domain, I need to figure out what restrictions there are on my x values. And similar as before, if I plugged in like 0 for x, I'd have 0 minus 5 is negative 5, but square rooted is imaginary. That doesn't work. The smallest x value that I could use, even if I did 2 times 2 is 4 minus 5, I'm still square rooting a negative number. The smallest x value I could use is 5 halves, or 2.5, but 5 halves, we like fractions. So my domain is really x is greater than or equal to 5 halves. Okay, my range, similar thought process as before. If I plug 5 halves in for x, minus 5 is 0, square rooted is 0. So my range is going to be related to 0 somehow. If I plug in a number more than 2.5, like 5 for example, 10 minus 5 square rooted is more than 0. So y greater than or equal to 0 is my range here. So for the inverse, my domain and my range switch. So it was my domain, becomes my range. Y is greater than or equal to 5 halves. And what was my range becomes my domain, x greater than or equal to 0. Okay, now let's figure out what my inverse would be, what my inverse function is. So again, I switch my x and my y around, which I'm going to rewrite the original again. Y equals the square root of 2x minus 5. Switch the x and the y around. And then I need to get y by itself. So I'm going to start off squaring both sides. And then we'll add 5. And finally divide by 2. So this isn't going to be the prettiest thing in the world. But there's my y equals x squared plus 5 over 2. And then kind of a similar situation as before, which I'm actually just going to go back up here. My inverse would look, or my original function would look something like this. My inverse, after my domain and my range switch, my domain was just x greater than or equal to 0 based on my inverse. That's the same thing down here. My domain is really just x is greater than or equal to 0. So I'm really only looking at half of that parabola. And that means I need to specify that down here. This is my inverse, but only x is greater than or equal to 0. We don't care about any negative x values getting plugged in there.